Russian overnight strikes caused fires at multiple energy infrastructure facilities in Ukraine as fighting intensified around the frontline city of Pokrovsk.
A suicide bomber outside a courthouse in Islamabad, Pakistan, has left 12 people dead and over 20 wounded.
At least one person was injured and several fires broke out after a wave of Russian drone strikes targeted the Odessa region, Ukraine's state emergency service said on Tuesday. The attacks happened late on Monday evening and triggered fires in a number of energy infrastructure facilities. All the blazes were extinguished by firefighters, the emergency service added. Strikes were also reported in the frontline city of Kramatorsk, where one person was reported killed after Russian drones hit civilian infrastructure, according to the city council. The strikes come as intense fighting continues on the front line, especially near the city of Pokrovsk, where Russian troops have been closing in over the past weeks. The two sides have locked in a battle for control of Pokrovsk in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region, where Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says Russia has assembled 170,000 troops for a renewed push. The General Staff of the Armed Forces said Ukrainian forces repelled 63 Russian attacks there over the past day.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy visited the frontline city of Kherson on Tuesday, as it marks its third anniversary since Ukrainian forces liberated it from Russian occupation. During his time in the city, Zelenskyy visited a Kherson hospital and met with local residents injured in Russian strikes. According to officials, he also met with troops and presented them with awards. In a video address recorded in Kherson, Zelenskyy said today's most important goal for the authorities is to strengthen the city's defenses.
Систем визначили, що треба дати Херсону, щоб було більше захисту, тисячі ударів російських дронів щомісяця проти цього міста. Фактично постійна така загроза. Визначив, що наші сили безпілотних систем, птахи Мадяра і інші підрозділи збільшать тут спроможності, саме спроможності захисту. Важливо.
The Kherson region is still partially occupied by Russian forces on the left bank of the Dnieper River. Kherson was the only regional capital that Russian troops managed to temporarily capture since Moscow's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. At least 12 people have been killed after a suicide bomber detonated outside the gates of a district court in Islamabad, Pakistan on Tuesday. According to Interior Minister Mohsin Naqvi, the attacker tried to, quote, enter the court premises, but failing to do so, targeted a police vehicle. No group has immediately claimed responsibility for the attack in the capital, which also injured 27 people. But Naqvi alleged that the attack was linked to the Pakistani Taliban, known as the TTP. Pakistan has seen a rise in violence in recent months, with a resurgence of the Pakistani Taliban, border tensions and a fragile ceasefire with neighbouring Afghanistan. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif denounced the attack in Islamabad and called for a full investigation, according to a statement issued by his office.
Indian authorities are investigating a deadly car explosion in New Delhi under an anti-terrorism law, officials said on Tuesday. The law allows broader powers to the National Investigation Agency, India's federal anti-terrorism body, to detain suspects. Forensic experts were working to determine the cause of the blast, which occurred near the historic Red Fort in India's capital on Monday evening. The explosion killed 8 people and injured 19 others, according to police. The government said New Delhi's international airport, metro stations, and government buildings were placed on a high security alert after the explosion. The 17th century Red Fort monument is one of India's most high-profile tourist attractions. The area around Red Fort is typically crowded, serving as a main route to the bustling bazaars of the old city.
France will on Thursday commemorate the 10th anniversary of the Paris attacks, paying homage to the 130 people killed and hundreds more wounded when 9 Islamist terrorists attacked the Bataclan concert hall, bars and terraces on 13 November 2015. As the anniversary approaches, survivors are also remembering the events more closely. Arthur Deneveux is the president of the Victims Association Life for Paris.
It took me a year and a lot of, medicine to overcome, I would say, the most critical phases of PTSD, which was, unexpectedly and more often than I would have liked, something popped up, either on the subway or, during fireworks when you feel the smoke. But since 2017, I would say I've had no panic attack. I've had nothing of that kind. But I'm very cautious because I'm not sure you heal from PTSD. I guess you have long periods of time where nothing happens.
The Paris municipality says it will open a memorial garden on Thursday in memory of the victims and survivors near the city hall. The garden symbolically marks the 6 sites of the attack, and the memorial columns bear the names of the victims.
COP30 has kicked off in Brazil and promises to make history with the largest Indigenous participation ever recorded. Around 3,000 representatives of Indigenous communities are expected in Belém over the next 2 weeks, a record number for a UN summit. 1,000 Indigenous peoples will participate directly in the official negotiations in the so-called Blue Zone. The remaining 2,000 will gather in the Green Zone, a space dedicated to civil society and where debates and activities open to the public take place. In an exclusive interview with Euronews, the Brazilian Minister for Indigenous Peoples, Sonia Guajajara, advocated for the inclusion of Indigenous communities in decision-making processes and international forums.
E, ministra, por que é tão importante a participação indígena num evento como a COP?
Comprovadamente, os territórios indígenas, os povos indígenas, são os que mais preservam a biodiversidade, as florestas, e que têm essa contribuição muito significativa para o equilíbrio do clima a partir da floresta em pé, a partir, do seu próprio modo de vida. Então, não tem como se pensar soluções sem considerar os que estão protegendo, os que estão já sendo impactados diretamente pela crise climática.
The Brazilian government has developed a range of initiatives to strengthen Indigenous representation in Belém. In the Green Zone, the People's Circle was created to value ancestral knowledge and promote dialogue between communities. Meanwhile, the COP village serves as accommodation and a meeting point for Indigenous delegations. Currently, Indigenous lands cover almost 14% of Brazil's territory, but account for just over 1% of the country's deforestation. Experts argue that the demarcation of these areas is one of the most effective ways to combat climate change. They also project a great deal of influence from Indigenous peoples during the summit.
Os negociadores vão estar participando de eventos na cidade e vão ver os movimentos sociais acontecendo. Vão ver as passeatas e as exigências das comunidades indígenas para poderem ter os seus direitos respeitados. E esses movimentos da sociedade civil, do setor privado, mais uma vez, ajudam a contaminar positivamente as negociações de maneira que elas aconteçam segundo o que também a sociedade espera desses negociadores.
COP30 began this Monday and runs until November 21st.
At 23 years old, Matteo hopes one day to take over his family's farm. This polyculture breeding farm of about 40 dairy cows is located in Belgium, not far from Brussels. Matteo plans to be a caregiver for 2 years, a status that allows him to maximize his chances of accessing financial assistance necessary to take over the farm.
Les terres en Belgique sont hors de prix. Et quand vous avez 23 ans que vous voulez reprendre une ferme, je pense pas que la banque soit d'accord de vous laisser un prêt d'1 million, 1,5 million, si pas plus, pour reprendre une ferme, quoi. Qui est en soi pas réellement rentable.
Only 12% of farmers are under 40 in the EU. The average age is 57 years. This aging presents a risk for food safety, warns the European Commission. Last month, the Commission presented a strategy to support generational renewal in agriculture. It proposes to include in the next common agricultural policy a starter pack of up to €300,000 to help young farmers get started. Other measures include the opening of the Erasmus program for young entrepreneurs to farmers and the creation of a European Land Observatory to promote access to land. The objective, to double the proportion of young farmers in the EU by 2040. For Matteo, the best way to encourage young people to start or stay in agriculture is to ensure fair prices.
On revient au même, les prix. Le débat sera clos, on sera payé comme il faut, ça va remotiver les gens. C'est parce que nous, on est tout le temps dedans et qu'on est passionnés, mais produire un lait à 40 centimes alors qu'il nous en coûte 50, on va motiver quelqu'un pour le faire, quoi. Produire de la viande à bas prix parce qu'on ne veut pas nous payer, avec un emprunt à 1 million sur nos têtes, va trouver quelqu'un qui va être motivé à faire ça.
Matteo stressed that consumers have an important role to play by buying local products.